and welcome to the Author Roundup, a special segment of the Book Connection Show where we meet up and coming indie authors and talk to them about their recently released books. Welcome to the Author Roundup. I'm your host, Jenny, and today I'm joined by a true powerhouse, Chantel L. Fisher, also known by her pen name, TrimTab. After breaking free from a life of drugs and criminal activity, she walked out of prison and in just 10 short years earned 7 degrees, launched three thriving businesses, and became a published author. Her new book, Objection Overruled: Discovering Your Purpose on Purpose, shows how she turned pain into purpose and setbacks into stepping stones, reminding us that our past does not define us. I'm so excited for this conversation with TrimTab. She's living proof that there's life after the fall if you get back up, dust yourself off, and walk boldly in your calling. Welcome, TrimTab. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Jenny. It's an honor to be here with you today.
I'm so excited to talk to you about your book. So it's called Objection Overruled: Discovering Your Purpose on Purpose. It's a very raw, honest, and deeply personal work. Now, take us back to the moment when you knew that you needed to write it and what inspired you to share your story so publicly. How did the
Okay.
idea for the book first come to life?
So people have been asking me since the day I walked out of prison as a transformed woman of God, right? Like, when are you going to write a book? When are you going to write a book? When are you going to write a book? And I will oftentimes just dismiss it. But then, like a couple of years ago, God really started dealing with me about like people love you. People, they're inspired by you. They really need to hear your story so that they can know that I am still in the healing business. So I said, okay, I started writing it and I had 3 pages of written content for about 3 years, right? And so
Mhm.
God kept just tugging at me, tugging at me, tugging at me, like, when are you going to get it started? So then, you always try to negotiate with God. I said, okay, if I try to find a publisher and I don't find one, then I'll know it's really not the time for me to write the book. And right away, Westbow Press came up. And so I said, okay, I met with them and they talked me through the process and I committed to it. And once I commit to something, I've never been a quitter. I've always been an all or nothing type of girl. And so once I committed to it, they gave me a solid timeline based on what I said that I wanted to accomplish. And I stuck with that goal. And at the end of it, I had the book, the finished product. But when God really started dealing with me about it, I toyed with like, what should I say? What should I keep secret, right? Because you don't really want to air all your dirty laundry. What will people think? Will people look at me differently? But then God reminded me that He had already been positioning me to share portions of my story so that it really wouldn't be a surprise for many people. Some it would be for those that don't know me, but for people that know me, they'll be able to connect the dots and say, aha, now we know why she's such an influential and powerful woman.
So it's like destiny. I mean, Westbrook
Yeah,
came at
yeah.
the right time.
At the
That
right time.
is.
Yeah, yeah. At the
Okay,
right time.
let's talk about your pen name this time, TrimTab. Can you explain the meaning behind it and how it reflects your mission?
So the name TrimTab came from a movie that I saw. I'm a nonprofit leader, and this guy wrote a movie called Uncharitable, the movie about how nonprofits are put in a dim light and are at a disadvantage in comparison to for-profit businesses. In this movie, he mentions Buckminster, and Buckminster he created the Trim Tab. The Trim Tab is a very small rudder that goes on the back of a larger rudder back when they were trying to figure out the navigation of these big Navy ships that they were creating, they really couldn't get those ships to turn like on a dime. So Buckminster created this trim tab, which is a really small rudder that they put on the back of the big rudder, and it helps the ship turn on a dime. And he likened it to a person that has the capacity to transform a whole system, right? To cause it to turn on a dime. And so I really latched on to that. And I created this t-shirt that said, just call me Trim Tab. And so I did a but I premiered the movie here in St. Louis, and people bought these t-shirts, and everybody just started calling me TrimTab. And so when we were going through the editing process and they talked about the sensitive nature of the some of the content, they suggested that I use a pen name. So
Mhm.
it was a no-brainer that I would use TrimTab as the pen name, because it really just helps people research it more. And then once they really find out like why I picked that pen name, and I often ask people, "Are you a TrimTab?"
Mhm.
And it
I
helps them say like, "I am a TrimTab."
I love the symbolism behind it. Right. And it's very significant and very much apt with the book that you have and also
Yes.
with your experience in your life in general. So, in your book, Trim Tab, you describe growing up in chaos. There's frequent moves, lack of emotional guidance, and family instability, and a lot more hardships that you had to go through. How did that environment shape your view of love and safety?
So love really wasn't a topic in our home. Like growing up, like we were provided for, so we didn't grow up poor. My mom worked for the railroad, my dad worked for the post office, so we didn't grow up poor. But like the focus was just on parents being providers. It was part of the day and age that I grew up in as a child, right? And so love really wasn't discussed in the household. So because we moved so much, I never really even bothered to make friends. So I grew up really spending a lot of time by myself. I've always been an avid reader. That was my getaway, right? And so I will read about all of the opportunities that people receive love stories. I just loved reading about it. And as I got older, I think in my quest to be loved, that was how I became a teenage mom.
Mhm.
I didn't realize how difficult it would be as a teenage mother, which is what ultimately led to me going to prison. But it all went back to me just being on a quest just to simply be loved. And I think many people are challenged with that today, especially now in the state that we find ourselves in as a country and a world. Like people really are just like they need to be loved more. If we can figure out how to love, God said the greatest two commandments are to love God and love people, and to love your neighbor really as you love yourself. But if you don't love yourself, if you've never been taught how to love you first, like how do you really navigate how to love someone else? Because you
Right.
really just don't know what it means to be loved. So figuring out how to play that out and just God putting me on the path that I'm on really not only helps me figure out how I want to be loved, right? So people don't tell me how I should be loved, but I have to figure out how I want to be loved, how others want to be loved, and then love them the way that they want to be loved, right? In conjunction with the way that I want to be loved.
Mhm. Okay, so it's good that you mentioned about being a teenage mother. Let's talk about that a little bit. How did your early childhood experiences, both the joyful and the traumatic experiences that you've had, shape who you became as a teenager and as a young adult?
So as a kid, like we were into sports and extracurricular activities. I really loved school. I was like I said, an avid reader. So I loved school. I graduated when I was only 16, so that kind of speaks to my level of academic rigor and the way I excel through the academia process. But at the end of that, I was kind of lost, right?
Mhm.
And I had this baby now because I had her when I was 15. I graduated when I was 16. So now what? Like my parents didn't talk to me, even though I was in like the dual degree like education where you went to college part of the school day and went to high school the other part. Like education, higher education just never was like it wasn't taught in our household. And so while I was extremely academically sound and excelled in academics, there wasn't a discussion. And so navigating what it meant to be a teenage mom really positioned me to try to like figure life out on my own. Unfortunately, I went the path that I shouldn't go. My parents never were incarcerated. It wasn't modeled in front of me. But one thing that I knew that I didn't want to do was to grow up poor.
Mhm.
And so in my quest for love, I have a kid and I equate love to buying things for her. And in my path to try to care for her, to make sure she had nice things, to make sure that we weren't poor, I find myself writing these bounce checks, not knowing that it was a crime.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of how like I wound up getting incarcerated the first time, arrested for the first time, and that trajectory kind of separated me from like what I was learning as far as motherhood was concerned. And so now I'm perpetuating a cycle, right? So now she's separated from her mom. Her dad stepped into the picture, which was great, but still that disruption of what love would actually mean for her and me.
Right. So, in your book, you also kind of mentioned that people who hurt others are often deeply hurt themselves, right? So, how did that understanding change the way you viewed your abusers?
Mhm. And so thinking about like hurt people, if you think about even with like how I said like the whole love component was missing from the household, like I ultimately wound up doing the same thing for with my daughter by being absent from her life so much through incarceration. And I also think about those abusers. Most of them were just attempts, but nonetheless, like that still traumatized me, right? My own uncle, who I cherished and loved dearly, was the very first person who attempted to expose me to what molestation and incest was. Like a kid at that age should never be exposed to that. But that really made me put my guards up and question what love really meant, right? Is this what love meant? Like, while I didn't understand what was going on because I was such a young kid, I did understand that something about it was not right. And then as I got a little bit older, here comes another man and attempts to do the same thing, and then another one, and then another one. And you question like what is this whole love thing about? Like how if every man that I come in contact with in my life only sees me as a means of release for them, like they why would they want to have sex with me? So that easily made me put a guard up to even engaging in relationships with men at all, right? And so I think as far as my abusers now, I've acquired enough grace to forgive them, but the whole forgive and forget, that's a myth. Like nobody can forget trauma that they experience, right? And so even the work that I do as a clinical social worker, I help people heal, right? Understanding that it's yours to keep. What do you do with it in a way that still allows you to live a healthy and meaningful life?
That's a very brave approach to
Mhm,
the experiences that you've had. And earlier, TrimTab, you started talking about, being in prison and all that. So you served time in prison 7 times over 20 years. What do
mhm.
you think kept pulling you back into that cycle?
Because what I've learned from being involved with the criminal justice system is that most people in society they live by the motto once a criminal always a criminal. If you do the crime you do the time. And so the way that it's set up now in society, once you get a criminal conviction, it becomes almost impossible for you to re-engage in society in a way that allows for you to have a meaningful life, right? So if I get out of prison and I can't get a job because I have a criminal conviction, and I can't lease an apartment because I have a criminal conviction, where does that leave me as a human being, right? And so because I wasn't oftentimes able to secure meaningful employment or meaningful housing, I went back to what I knew, and that was to break the law to make a living for me and my kid. I still had my kid. I still had to live. And so I always went back to doing what I knew to do, knowing ultimately one day it would lead me right back to prison. It wasn't until I went to prison that last time that somebody started asking me different questions, right? Like they say, you seem so bright. Like, what is it that you want to do with your life? And people didn't ask me that question for 20 years of my life. They didn't ask me that question. They often just told me what I needed to do. And if I didn't do those things, I went back to prison.
So it became like a vicious cycle
That's-
for you.
It's called recidivism. Most people who wind up with a criminal conviction get caught in that cycle of recidivism because of the barriers and the collateral consequences that people who have criminal convictions face on a daily basis.
Mhm. So you've experienced it, and I know that your experiences actually showed you that many people don't understand the emotional and psychological toll of incarceration. What do you wish more people knew about that?
The emotional, psychological, and emotional toll that incarceration has on people is huge. I don't think people that haven't been involved with the criminal justice system understand how humongous the impact is. So anytime a person makes even the slightest contact with the criminal justice system, is a traumatic experience, not only for the individual that's incarcerated, but also their friends and family and loved ones that support them through that period of incarceration. An example is in my daughter. Growing up, the only way that she really had a relationship with me was when she visited me in jail and prison. Every time that she visited me, she was patted down like frisk search by an officer, sometimes a male, sometimes a woman, but nonetheless an adult. She heard the crackling of the radios. She heard the jangling of the keys. She heard the doors slam behind her, right? Each time she heard that over 20 years was a traumatic experience for her. Now, consider the person who is actually incarcerated and they deal with that day in and day out. Day in, day out, sometimes for months and years of hearing being patted down by officers, being strip searched sometimes, listening to those radios, doors slamming behind them. That is a traumatic experience on top of a traumatic experience on top of a traumatic experience. Fast forward to now they're being released, they take that home with them, right? And so those experiences lead to PTSD. And I think oftentimes people don't see the experience of incarceration as being a contributor to PTSD, and it very much is. Also, something else that I wish that people knew about those involved with the criminal justice system is that they're not the sum total of the bad choices that they made that landed them in prison. They should have a right to reclaim their dignity and their lives after incarceration. And I think people don't understand the magnitude of the barriers and the collateral consequences that those that have a criminal conviction are challenged to navigate once they come home from prison. Most people who are involved with the criminal justice system have issues with finding gainful employment. They have issues with finding stable, safe, and secure housing. And so, if a person is released from prison, they can't get a job, they can't get access to safe, stable housing, how are they left? They're left hopeless and helpless, right? Trying to figure out how to navigate life simply because they made some bad choices. So, I really wish that people understood how important it is that people who are involved with the criminal justice system have access to the same basic necessities that everyone in the world needs to have access to.
So the impact of the incarceration is felt not just by the person who was in prison, but especially those around that person, like the loved
Yes.
ones and all that. And it goes even beyond
Yes.
after serving the term, right? Okay.
Yes.
So, so you credit your transformation to a personal relationship with God. So after experiencing all of that, there was a personal transformation, and you credit all of that to Him. How did faith become your anchor in the middle of so much pain?
I think faith had always been my anchor through all of my pain. I just didn't understand it to be faith. I always believed in God, even though I wasn't raised in church. My only real contact with God was when people would invite me to church and I would take them up on the offer. And I think that laid the foundation for God to later, plant a stake in my faith in Him. And that began the last time that I was arrested and I was in St. Louis County Jail many years in my life, I had been sick of everybody and everything around me, but I had never gotten to the place where I had gotten sick of myself. Well, I was at that place that day in St. Louis County Jail. I was sick of myself. I hated my life, never was suicidal. So that wasn't an option for me, but I did not want to continue to live my life the way that I was living my life. So I cried out to God in St. Louis County Jail that day, and He did a transformation instantly for me. I began to study His word and believe every promise that I read in that Bible. So where I read that He was a deliverer, I believed that He could deliver me. I believed that He could deliver me from heartache, from pain, from drugs, from a criminal life, criminal activity, everything that kept me from being all that God created me to be. I believed that He could deliver me from it. Not only did I believe that He could deliver me, but I also bought into His promise that He was a healer. So I believe that He could heal me from all the traumatic experiences, from all the heartache, from all the pain, from every time I hurt someone, for how I had missed the opportunity to raise my daughter. I just believe that He could heal me from all the guilt, from all the shame. And day by day, He continues to show up in my life in ways that helps remind me that He is my everything. He is my source. He is my all in all. And now I use that same faith in God to help others believe that they were created before the foundation of the world with a specific purpose and plan in mind, that before God formed them in their mother's womb, He knew them and He knew the perfect purpose and plan that He had for their life.
And it's beautiful how you turned your pain into purpose through something that's very close to your heart, the Soul Fisher Ministries. Tell us
Yes.
about the heart behind that organization.
So the Soul Fisher Ministries was a vision given to me by God, and the mission of the Soul Fisher Ministries is to respond to the needs of youth with incarcerated parents and to promote restorative justice for those currently or formerly incarcerated. And God has really used my faith to not only write the vision, He helped use my faith to make it plain so that those who read it can take the vision and run with it. So what started as just a vision way back in 2012 is now a thriving pillar in the community, the St. Louis community and abroad. We're transforming lives through quality after school programming for students who have an incarcerated parent. We're helping restore justice for those who are impacted by the criminal justice system. So we work with them while they're in prison and transition with them back into the community and help them navigate those same barriers that God gave me the wisdom to navigate for my own life. And so I'm doing things through the Soul Fisher Ministries and God's support and help and guidance that I never even dreamed that I could do with my life. Nobody could have told me when I was sitting in the middle of my bed one day, getting high, feeling helpless, feeling lost, feeling hopeless, that one day I will be impacting not only lives, but communities around the world in such a meaningful way.
So, through your ministry, you work with justice involved women and, of course, the children of incarcerated parents. Why are those communities so close to your heart?
They're so close to my heart. The after school program started because my daughter, she didn't excel initially as well as I would have liked her to, because her dad just wasn't as academically sound as I was. And so he spent a lot of money and time on tutors. And so when I took this class about writing a business plan, they help walk you through like what do you see yourself being able to do well, and do for a long time. And so I've always been a teacher. I just didn't teach people to do great things. And so I said, okay, maybe I could work with tutor kids. And they said, well, what kids would you tutor? And I said, well, maybe I can tutor kids who have a parent that's incarcerated, just remembering how her dad had to navigate that whole system. And then I said, I could probably also work with women who are impacted by the criminal justice system, because I understood that if it had not been for my friends and family, that I would not be who I was or where I was at that time in my life. Because a lot of the women in prison, they don't have contact with their kids, they lose them to foster care, they don't get visits, they have no decision making in the lives of their kids. I maintained all of that throughout 20 years of incarceration, and so I understood that that was unique, that was not the norm. So I said I could help also women who were impacted by the criminal justice system. So that's really how those two populations that we serve came about. And God just has helped me find a way to merge it in a way that's really unique to the Soul Fisher Ministries. And people are always reaching out to us, asking us, how can you do it? And can you show us how to do it? And we're now building out a model that can be replicated across the world.
You already talked about, motherhood for those women who have been incarcerated. And in your book, you also talked about your relationship with your biological daughter and the
Mhm.
deep love that you feel for your spiritual daughters. How has
Yeah.
motherhood shaped your journey?
So motherhood has really shaped my journey because I understand that were it not for my daughter's dad, she probably would have wound up in foster care. And so now I try to help those, even women who have lost their kids to foster care because of their involvement with drugs and alcohol in the criminal justice system. I still convince them that their life still has meaning and is still worth living, right? Remember, all of that trauma is yours for a lifetime. It's up to you what you decide to do with it. There's a place in the book where I talk about unpacking it, right? You got to unpack your luggage, right? Because you need to now pack to go on this journey of faith with God. And if you drag all of that trauma with you along the way, as opposed to just unpacking it and owning it and saying, okay, this happened. Okay, I did this, but that's not who I am. Those are either things that happened to me or choices that I made. So now, how do I accept it, heal from it, grow from it, and also help others to do the same? And that's really how now through the Chantel Fisher Ministries, I really do women's conferences that help women not only connect with their faith, but heal from their traumatic experiences while they walk out their faith.
Mhm. So you talked about healing as well. What does forgiveness look like for you, like especially towards the family members who have failed or
Mhm.
hurt you?
Mhm. None of it can happen. Healing has no place aside from forgiveness. They go hand in hand. So if you can't forgive, then you really won't be able to fully heal. But you also have to allow people to make their own choices. So not everybody in my family has forgiven me, right? Not everybody in my family supports me, but I've committed to being happy regardless, right? And so people have to understand that people's journey is their own journey and they have their own decisions to make. You don't get to make those decisions for people, but people also don't get to make your decisions. You ask people to forgive you, it's a choice for them to make. If the choice for them is to not forgive you, you've done your part by asking. Accept it, move on, and continue healing. The only thing that you're required to do is your part. And the only part that you have to play in asking someone for forgiveness is the ask. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, for those that have caused you harm, if you're saying that you're walking out faith, that you're walking by faith and not by sight, you're obligated to forgive. Does it mean that you forget? Absolutely not. But you forgive. And once you forgive, you can't hold it over someone's head. And forgiveness is really for you. It's not for your perpetrator. It's for you. Forgiveness frees you. Some people may never even care if you forgive them, but you still have to forgive them if you truly want to heal from that traumatic experience.
That's a very liberating perspective that you showed
Mhm.
us right there. How about love? How did you learn to accept love again after, so much betrayal, and especially
Yeah.
by men in positions of trust?
Mhm. So for me, I know that if I've hurt people too, right? People that trusted me, people that loved me. So I know that if I hope to regain their love one day, I have to be willing to again forgive and love people in spite of. I think we oftentimes put conditions on our love for people, and that's not the way that God loves us. God loves us unconditionally. And so my motto is always be willing to extend as much as or more grace than you hope to receive. And in that, you have to love, right? Whether people accept your love, love is unconditional. That doesn't mean because you love someone that they're obligated to receive that love. Again, I believe one of the first steps that you have to make in loving someone is to understand how they want to be loved. And in the same token, the first step in you being loved is to not understand how you need to be loved. And I think that's where your relationship and with God begins, with Him teaching you to understand how you really need to be loved. So oftentimes, life has shown us how we want to be loved or how we need to be loved. But the way that God wants to love you and the way that you want to be loved is between you and God. And again, it goes back to you being able to unpack that trauma because a lot of us define love around our traumatic experiences. But that's not the way that God designs love. God's love is agape and it has no conditions.
That's very beautiful words coming from you.
Thank you.
So, TrimTab, let's take a look at your publishing journey this time.
Mm,
This is your first
gosh.
book. How long did it take you to complete the book? And are there any memorable moments from the writing process that you'd like to share with us?
It took about 6 months for me to like finish writing the book. Remember, I shared at the beginning of the interview that it took me, I had about 3 pages for about 3 years. But once I committed to doing the book, it took me about 6 months to actually get the manuscript written. Finally sent that in to the publishers. And then there was a whole editing back and forth. You like this, you don't like that. And then the whole pen name, that took some more time to decide whether or not I wanted to use a pen name or if I wanted to go the route of getting all the notarized statements. I didn't want to be dealing with all of that, so that's why I elected to use a pen name. But from start to finish, it took me about 6 months to actually write the manuscript.
Mm-hmm.
And then I sent the manuscript in December, and by June we had finished the publishing process. So about a year total.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about the process of writing your story. How was it?
It was quite challenging because you don't want to overshare. It was a first book, and I wanted anybody to be able to relate to the book. So it took a lot of prayer, it took a lot of fasting because I wanted to make sure that the content was content that anybody could read and receive inspiration and hope from. So not just justice impacted women, right? Not just women, but men included. I wanted anybody to be able to pick up that book and actualize the transforming power of God in a person's life once they fully embrace the ability that God has to heal them. And I think that together with the publisher, we were able to really bring that to life.
And now that your book is out, what's the most significant feedback or review that you received about the book so far?
The most transparent feedback or the most important feedback that I think that I've gotten is that it met the goal that I was hoping to achieve, and that is that anybody can receive from it. So I've had men to give me feedback on it that have read the book. I've had kids that have read the book that gave me feedback on it. I didn't know kids would read the book. Women who have read the book and they just really appreciate the raw honesty, right? The honesty and just not only me telling the story, but giving some concrete steps that people can take to actually get on a healing journey and heal.
Must have felt so good to know that that's the impact that your book
Yes,
has on a
it
lot of
was.
people. How about for those who are just, probably thinking of writing their own book? What advice would you give to them?
I will first say the only thing to it is to do it. So get to writing. If you don't ever put any words on the paper, you will never get the book written. So just write, just start by just writing. Just write anything, right? That's what I did. I just started writing whatever God would place in my heart. If I would be driving down the street, things would come to my mind. I would start a voice recording and just start chatting, right? Then I would go back and transcribe those words. If I would wake up one morning with a thought in my mind, I would just start writing about that. If a scripture came to my heart, I would write that scripture down. I would email it to myself. Like, there's no right or wrong way to do it, but if you don't start writing, you'll never get the book written. So just start writing.
Yes, that's true. If someone listening feels like their story is too broken to be redeemed, what would you want to tell them today?
Those are the stories that need to be told. I promise you, there's someone who needs to hear your story. Don't let the enemy convince you that you've been through too much. Nobody wants to hear what you have to say. That's a lie from the pit of hell. God created you for a specific plan and purpose, and He knew everything that you would go through. And His word says that He works all things together for your good. That means the good, the bad, and the ugly. All of it works together for your good. Your story is worth telling. Your story is worth hearing. Somebody needs to hear your story so that they can grab hold to some healing and hope.
And finally, TrimTab, please invite everyone watching and listening to visit your website, follow you on social media, and of course, get a copy of your book.
Yes, get the copy. You can get a copy of the book. You can go to my website, chantelfisher.com, to get a copy of the book. You can also go to sfenterprises.me to get the book. You can also go to Amazon to get the book. You can go to Barnes and Noble and get the book. And you can also go to my publisher's site, westbowpress.com, and also get the book. You can follow me on all social media channels. I'm all over the place. Chantel Fisher, the Soul Fisher Ministries, Chantel Fisher Enterprises, Chantel Fisher Ministries. I'm all over social media on Instagram as well as YouTube and Facebook.
So, we've had such an inspiring conversation. TrimTab's journey proves that God's grace is bigger than our past and His purpose greater than our pain. If you'd like to dive deeper into TrimTab's journey, please grab a copy of the book Objection Overruled: Discovering Your Purpose on Purpose by TrimTab. It's available in softcover, hardcover, and ebook formats in Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, Westbow Press online bookstore, and of course, other resellers. Thank you, Chantel, TrimTab, for sharing your story with us. And thank you, as always, for tuning in with me, Jenny, on the Author Roundup. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time.